This episode of The Adam Messer Show is brought to you by Valhalla Books. The Devil's Due horror anthology is scheduled to release on Halloween 2020. You can get your copy today from valhallabooks.com. And welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. You're listening to WREU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WREU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. This is the Adam Messer Show, and I'm your host, Adam Messer. And Sebastian, would you mind playing a little bit of live music for us, sir? All right, thanks, Sebastian, and I appreciate you playing for us again. All right, so today, y'all, we have a repeat guest, and we've got a new guest on the show. So we have Rachel Brune from Crone Girls Press, and then we also have Elizabeth Davis on the line with us. And I'm really sorry about the quality of the sound today. I forgot my aux thing, and we're having a little bit of reverb there on the line too, so we got some buzz noise in there. So Rachel, welcome to the show, and Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Adam. It's good to be here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here on this Sunday afternoon.
Awesome. So Rachel, can you introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about your new book coming out?
Absolutely. I'm Rachel Brune. I'm the founder and editor at Crone Girls Press. And the new book is our third full-length anthology entitled Stories We Tell After Midnight, Volume 2. And it's a follow-up of horror-themed short stories. It's the second volume of this series, in which, the first of which, your story, Adam, debuted in Stories We Tell After Midnight 1. And that was right around this time last year. And that will be out October 1st. So just in time for Halloween season.
Oh yeah, definitely. And Elizabeth, do you mind giving everybody a little bit of background about yourself as well?
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Davis. I'm a second-generation writer from Dayton, Ohio, and I share Dead Fish Books with my mom, which is a micropress. And I'm working on releasing my first novel later this fall, which is If I Should Die Before I Wake, which is the first in a series of Learning to Fly and Other Bizarre Adventures, which I describe as a bunch of bisexual trash fire magical space police that fight monsters and fail to order pizza.
And tell us about your story that you have in this anthology that is coming out.
I have The Cut-Mouth Woman and Me, which is my take on a very popular urban legend from Japan, which is the Cut-Mouth Woman, who is this spirit. She's most of the time a spirit. Occasionally some of the stories have her being a person of flesh and blood who haunts children. And how these stories normally go is you're walking on the street and you have this woman wearing a face mask, which is not uncommon at all in Japan and not uncommon right now everywhere else. And she'll ask, "Am I pretty?" And you say yes because you're polite. And then she takes off her mask, which shows her mouth's been cut from ear to ear, and will ask, "Am I pretty now?" And if you go no or yes, you'll end up dead. So you have to either say so or something else. Since this is mostly oral and internet legend, it changes a lot with its retelling, and that's why I said some versions have her being an actual person who's doing this, and one version had her living beneath a stadium. That's the fun thing about urban legends. They're pretty much a lot like folklore in the amount of variations that you get.
Yeah, I gotcha. So give me 1 second here, Bass. Would you? I'm gonna play an announcement real quick.
Yep.
All right, I'll be right back. Hey, you gotta do something about that buzzer. It's horrible. I can't play that. I can't do the interview like that. You gotta do something about that buzzer. No, I mean, I'm hearing. I'm not in the hallway, and I'm just got you on my phone. It's nothing to do with the studio stuff here. Yeah, we could try to do that. Let's do that. Yeah, because otherwise you're gonna have to mute your mic in between talking, because it's like just all of like it's making it real bad. So hold on, so I'll try to call you over back. Hey, hold on a second. Let me try to merge it again. Hold on a second. Hello, can you hear me? All right, let's try this again, y'all. And I am so sorry about the reverb. We're just trying to fix this, but we got it back on. All right. So Elizabeth, you were saying before I cut off real quick that the story is like a Japanese urban legend.
Inspired by Japanese urban legends.
Yeah. So tell me more about that. How did you come across that story, and or how were you inspired to write a story kind of based off of that?
I came across that story back in high school, back when creepypasta started becoming big on the internet. And it was one of the first Japanese urban legends to start moving through the internet. Since it had become such a big internet long in Japan, that's probably why I got picked to be one of the first transfers over to be translated and such. I don't really know much about its origins of coming over to America. I just know it just suddenly started popping up at the creepypasta thing, which I was watching grow when I was in high school.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And the reason I picked it is because it's a story that's always stuck with me. I always felt like there was something deeper there to explore than just this, boogie man who's approaching kids on the street, which Rachel had to deal with this like several paragraph long afterward of all my research just word vomited on the page. Because gosh darn it, someone was going to have to read all the work I did.
I do remember that, and it was funny because I had been reading the story, and when I pulled it up in the submission pile, I thought it was really neat because it did take on this angle of an urban legend that had been in so many different iterations and had evolved. I mean, the story made me go on the internet and start looking and seeing, oh my gosh, okay, there's like a YouTube video, there's a movie, there's all this really great stuff. And when I got to the end of the story, there was an explanation of who the woman was. And I thought to myself, well, you don't really need it because it's all there in the story. And so I remember before doing that, I was like, would you mind if we just, took this part out, because it's all right there in the story. And I think that as an editor, I commend Elizabeth for just being like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew it wasn't really needed. I just was, as the joke goes about writers and research, I did all this research, now you get to see on the page, regardless if that information dump is needed or not. I'm sure you come across in that in much of your editing.
Yeah.
And what I was going to say, real quick, as a good research, if you like Japanese urban legends, is a podcast called Kawabana. The person who does it speaks Japanese and English, and she translates internet urban legends on the podcast about every other week. And she has quite a few books of translations and such out there as well. So if you want to do more research, she would be the person I would check out for what's on the pulse in Japan right now.
Oh, that's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So Rachel, speaking of editing, it's been a little while since you've been on the show. I mean, you've been on the show quite a few times. You're like one of our semi-regular guests here. So what's new with you and Chrome Girls Press besides the third full anthology coming out?
It's been a little nuts. I've been kind of thinking about next year and what we want to do. And of course, this year I thought to myself, we'll do 2 full-length anthologies. It'll be really great. Of course, the pandemic hit, and then everything kind of went a little wonky. So next year, I'm looking at finishing up the Stories We Tell After Midnight series.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometime in February, maybe, we'll be opening up for submissions for that the third book in that series. And the best way to, like, if you're a horror writer and you're thinking, this sounds interesting, this Rachel character doesn't sound too annoying to work with.
You're not annoying at all.
The best place to go and look for our submissions is either on our website, which is chromegirlspress.com, or to come and join us on our Facebook page. It's not all Halloween memes, although we certainly have enough of those. But anything that's coming up, I'll post there, including about the next anthology.
That's really cool. Yeah, if you were annoying, I would not want to have you on the show. Period. I don't have enough time in the day to deal with people like that. It's too draining. I like to read about vampires, but I don't like to deal with energy vampires in real life. So
boundaries are good. Boundaries are good.
I know, right? Speaking of what's new, I've got a couple of announcements I want to share. So Josh Vasquez, the author of the Savannah Zombie novel series here in Savannah, he's a good buddy of mine. He and I put together this little movie short for The Devil's Due, which is Valhalla Books. That's my publishing company. And we put out the movie trailer, like a little preview today of the movie trailer. And it's just a movie short, but I'm pretty excited about it. It's The Devil's Due, and it's based off of the same premise of my anthology, The Devil's Due, Rachel, which you are one of our lead anchor authors in the book. And I'm pretty excited about that. And, one of the things I love about the writers community is, and I'm going to piggyback off of one of the first conversations that you and I had. It's been almost 2 years. I mean, like, I can't believe it's been that long, because I remember I put the vampire book out like in August of 2018, and I think it was maybe like early the next year, like January or February. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was early the next year that I did the interview for you with your blog. But when you were putting together the first anthology, The Stories We Tell After Midnight, you approached me, and we were talking, and one of the things that settled in my mind that I was like, this is, like you would be a good person to work with, is you're talking about wanting to be a good citizen of the community. And, I feel like that's really important, because since then, this year's been crazy with all the stuff with the pandemic. And yeah, I mean, like, I wanted to publish the anthology back in May. Like, I actually wanted to publish it on Dracula Day, but that didn't happen. But one of the things I think is a blessing that came out of all of this is, like, I feel like there's been a lot, excuse me, a lot of growth and development this year in the writing community. I've got to do a station announcement real quick, y'all. Everybody, you're tuning in today, WRUU, LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And again, I do apologize for the crackling and all the other stuff at the beginning of the show. I forgot my little iPhone aux cord. And so I had to do this on the speaker, and we were having some reverb issues, but we got that worked out. So I'm glad that we got that done. But again, if you're tuning in just now and you're listening to the podcast afterwards, sorry. We're human and things happen. So thanks for listening. And but going back to that, Rachel, that was one of the big key factors for me because I try to work with people who are professional. I try to be professional myself. I know that, like, I make mistakes. But that's one of the key factors for me with wanting to work with somebody, especially if it's a project where I have to put my name on it and it's going to be going out to the public. I want to make sure that it's, it's a good product. I want to put forth my best work, and I want to work with people who are the doers and that are putting forth their best work as well. So, I was really honored to be part of the Stories We Tell After Midnight, first anthology, being one of the first Chrome Girls Press authors, and just being part of that big family there.
Yeah, it's definitely our community, I do think, has definitely found ways to grow closer together. At first, I was not super happy. And I think we've all kind of gone through the stages of pandemic grief, denial and anger, and then denial again, and a little more anger. But
apathy. I've had a lot of apathy.
Apathy, right? The struggle to be creative when everything is falling apart.
I've had the question of, like, is what I'm doing even matter? Does it even matter? That's a big question that I've had, kind of just... I mean, and there's been times where, like, I'm like, what am I doing with this? I mean, why, and then I see, like, I'll see something that you'll do, or like Bobby Nash, or, like with the guys and girls at Jim, the folks over at the Continual. And then I'm like, well, it does matter because there are people out there who care.
Right. Well, I make a joke a lot, especially on social media, because I do tend to deal with pain through humor, sometimes self-deprecating humor. But I often make the joke, I'm like, I am a horror publisher in a pandemic.
What better material to harvest from?
Exactly. Sometimes I'm just standing in the void yelling, please buy my book.
I'm telling you, it's so crazy. And Elizabeth, please don't feel like, feel like you can chime in at any time. I'm not trying to exclude you or anything like that. I know it's your first time on here, but I like to have, like, just a kind of like an all-encompassing type, whatever. So if you're, please.
I just had to mute my mic for a bit because my cat got interested.
Oh. What's your cat's name?
We have two, Violet and Ulysses. Violet's the one that will try to attack the phone if you're talking on it and sitting down, or even if you're standing close to anything like a table or a shelf or...
Feed me, human. I love the Catterday memes, by the way. I'm like a big cat meme person. I'm highly allergic to cats, but I love cat memes. And I love dogs. I love dogs all the way around, but, I love cats too, so. But, Rachel, I feel the same way. I'm like, that's one of the big things, especially with Valhalla Books. Being an indie author publisher before was one thing, because it's just me. Right. But now, having that responsibility of trying to not only put out the best product for myself, but also, having other authors, it's like, there's a whole lot of added layers to that, and it has been a difficult time. I mean, like, one of the reasons why I try to, do what I can for the Chrome Girls Press is because I'm like, I feel like what you're doing is good, and I try to do my part to help out, just like you do. You share and you try to help me out, and And it's not because of hey, I owe you, you owe me thing. It's more of like, hey, I like what you're doing. I want to just help my friend out. And
And I think that as time has passed, we have seen the creative community come to grips with, all right, we're gonna change this. We're gonna maybe change how we're doing things, maybe demand a little bit less of ourselves, find new ways of reaching out to people,
mm-hmm.
and I have mostly seen this happen in a mutually supportive way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that has really helped Chrome Girls Press is the fact that we do have authors who want to be part of a community of authors. So we have the authors only group, and one of the reasons that I suggested Elizabeth come on the show when you asked if there was anybody there is because she's very active. I'm going to talk about you, Elizabeth. She's active in the group, and when there's opportunities that pop up, she's like, hey, I'm here, I'm available. And for me, as an editor and as a editor who's trying to use everything I can to promote without necessarily having a traditional publishing budget, to me that's very, very, very helpful, is when authors are active and have a presence. And if I say, hey, I found this opportunity, who's available? And they pop up and say, yep, I got it.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised at how many people don't. I mean, like I was really surprised with just when I started publishing. I was just really surprised at how many people will just send like a pitch that's not in the guideline or doesn't follow the pitch rules. And it's nice when you see somebody who's like it's really nice when you see somebody who's like they're a stakeholder in what they're doing, and trying to build something like that too, and being part of the community and being available, and it's really nice. I mean, because it's like you can't buy that, I mean, and even if we had a big budget, I mean, like everybody's struggling right now. The big publishers are struggling. I mean, everybody's struggling. There's so much stuff out there now. I mean, like look at the movie industry. I mean, like the movie industry this year is just kind of tanked out. This is the first year Marvel hasn't put a movie out since like 2008 or something like that, 2009. So
that should hopefully. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No.
That should hopefully mean people have more time to read our books. I was going to say is Rachel was giving me all the props for stepping up, and it's like, hey, I'm a very fresh face on the scene, and I've been put in charge of the social promoting part of Dead Fish Books because my mom is a bit more retiring. So I got to take every opportunity that's handed to me.
Yeah, why not? So speaking of that, like we've got a few minutes here before the half-hour break. What is Dead Fish Books?
Dead Fish Books is basically a micro press dedicated to doing a bit speculative fiction, mostly science fiction and fantasy, with a bit more of a retro feel that still is very accepting opening. Basically, I want my, as part of the description of it, genderqueer lensmen out there. Mostly because some of our frustration was that at the same time that science fiction fantasy is becoming more opening, that's also when we saw a very literary ship, which has produced some very nice stories. Not going to complain about those. Ursula Le Guin, love her any day. But also we have stepped away from a lot of the more traditional sword and sorcery and high fantasy by the areas that are more embracing of the LGBTQ communities and the BIPOC communities and stuff like that. So it's like, can we make a space that has a bit more of a traditional science fiction adventure feel that is still open for everyone? Not make it feel like that you either have the high literary or the same old, same old.
Yeah, I think that's important, especially with inclusiveness and representation. I feel like is a big part of the changing face of the publishing industry. So it's interesting to see how different things come out. Because the way I feel about it too is that people will read stories that they want to read. And if you have a good story, it's going to rise to the top. And when there are these trends that people want to see different genres, or they want to see, like with romance. Romance is a big, like I think one of my friends was telling me that out of now this is a couple years old, okay, so I'm gonna preface it that way. But a friend of mine, she's really big into the romance publishing industry, and Amazon has like 7 or 8 thousand new titles a day, and of those titles, 40% of them are romance novels. But romance is a lot like horror, and it covers every genre. Like you can have, a romance novel about every type of genre out there. And so it's interesting how I feel like the playing field is changing, and the face of publishing is changing a lot, and that these other, stories that maybe have been underrepresented, and not had as much key focus on, they're starting to push forward, and they're starting to get more notice. And I know there's a lot of call right now for people of color for publishing. A lot of publishers are asking for more people of color to submit, and that they're trying to look at what's out there and trying to make the playing field a little bit more equal for everybody.
I like this trend personally.
Yeah, I do too.
Oh yeah.
I like to read, so I will read. Until publishing week came around, I've been reading 3 or 4 books a week. Not a huge amount compared to some, but still a pretty steady diet. And I get bored if I just read the same character, the same setting. I think it's one of the reasons why I enjoy publishing short stories.
Yeah.
So for me, as many different characters, as many different settings, as many different perspectives and points of view that I can find, to me, that's an intrinsic good. And I wish to encourage this trend as much as possible. If you saw my TBR pile, it's about 2 bookshelves at this point.
Yeah.
I am so jealous yours is so small.
I'll tell you what, I've got a bunch of books that I want to read too, and that's Rachel, going back to the short stories. I love reading short stories as well. As a kid, I used to read short stories all the time, and I'm on a break right now from this little challenge, but I started doing Ray Bradbury's challenge of read a poem, a short story, and an essay a night. And I'm up to day 54. I'm taking this last week off though, and reading short stories, reading an essay and a poem a night. And I never read anything about Ray Bradbury other than the compulsory Fahrenheit 451 that you read in like 9th grade English class, right? But man, such a good storyteller. And then speaking of Ursula K. Le Guin, I watched this, I think it was on PBS, but there was a documentary talking about her writing, and like how she, for the most part, she was an underrepresented voice back in the day, and people were like, wow, this is so cool. She created like this epic story. I've never read anything by her. And, but when I watched the documentary, I was like, wow. The only thing I've ever read of her, and the reason why I came across this documentary was because one of our local booksellers, I wanted to, I've been reading different books on writing and, story crafting and stuff like that. And Ursula K. Le Guin used to do this talk show. I think it was WROO or something like that. I can't remember exactly. It might have been KROO. But there was a talk show that she used to do, just kind of like we're doing now, with interviews, and they published the book of different interviews that she had done with them, and she was talking about her writing. So I was looking her up and things like that, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. And she was doing it, back in the 60s and 70s, and until she passed away, trying to open up and share something different, All right, we got to do the station break real quick, y'all. You're listening to WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul.
This portion of WRUU Savannah Soundings programming is provided by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have available online ordering and curbside delivery, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 12 to 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com. Many critical issues are facing the residents of Savannah and all Americans, including the coronavirus, homeschooling, and the upcoming general election. WRUU has 3 programs which address these issues: The Common Good on Fridays from 2 to 3 p.m., The Happy Homeschooler on Wednesdays from 2 to 3 p.m., and We the People, The Constitution Today on Sundays from 8 to 9 p.m. Stay informed about these important issues by tuning into these programs on WRUU.
How many times have you heard WRUU's corporate underwriting message? If you remember it, then your potential customers will remember your message as well. We are offering this space to connect corporate and institutional partners with our loyal and active listeners. Underwriting on WRUU is short, so listeners don't tune out. It's exclusive, so your message won't be lost in advertising clutter, and it supports Savannah's only community radio station. For a marketing package to increase your reach beyond traditional media, email underwriting at wruu.org.
You are attuned to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, wruu.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul.
And here is Sebastian Messer playing some live music in the studio. Thanks, Bass. All right, and Rachel, you play some guitar too, don't you? You're a musician.
From time to time.
Yeah.
I literally 2 days ago dug my bass guitar out from the moving boxes and hooked it up. So I'm hoping to play a little bit more music soon after launch.
I'm not a musician, but I like to. I've got a ukulele and I've got my own guitar, and I like to strum from time to time, but I only know like a couple of chords, and I really don't know like how to play. But I just love live music. So anyway, so today, y'all, if you're just now tuning in, I have Rachel Brune, who is the publisher of Chrome Girls Press. You probably recognize her because she's been on the show several times. And a couple weeks ago, we had Eddie Generous and Lorena Warnock on the show, and they were talking about their stories. And today, for the Stories We Tell After Midnight, Volume 2, and today we also have Elizabeth Davis, who has her story in the upcoming anthology. And you said that's coming out October the 1st, which is like this upcoming week, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. So,
Yep, Thursday.
you have, how many stories are in this one, Rachel?
We have 24.
Wow.
And, it's a mix of short stories between 3,000 and 6,000 words. We have some flash fiction in there, and then we have a novella to finish it up. And the novella is a story called The Bugs Come Out at Night by Mike Sullivan, who also did the trailer that we posted a little while ago.
Oh, nice.
Yep. And a lot of the stories are kind of set in a contemporary setting, or at least like a pre-pandemic contemporary setting. And we do have a few apocalypse stories. We've got some haunted house stories. We've got some haunted subway stories. And I always do seem to accept a couple of stories that just kind of stomp all over my fear of bugs and creepy crawlies.
Meanwhile, I'm over here in the brigade that bugs are friends.
Bugs are, for the most part, bugs are friends. They're all part of the ecosystem. And I love it when they stay very far away from me and contribute to that ecosystem.
Some of the emerald spores.
Didn't you almost have a mosquito carry y'all off, Rachel, pretty recently in your camper? I remember you posting about, like, being out there in the woods, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to be swarmed by mosquitoes.
We were, spoiler alert, because in the summer in North Carolina, if you leave the woods, the mosquitoes are going to get you, and they're going to be very unrepentant about it.
You're like, is that a storm cloud? No, it's a mosquito cloud coming at you. By the time they're done, all that's left is like skin and bones. It drains you dry.
There is a. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There is some children's books that follow this family called the Brune family, which is a bunch of tall tales, and this is related to mosquitoes. Bunch of tall tales, and one of them is talking about them complaining about how big the mosquitoes were, and then someone from Texas says, "Oh, yours aren't so bad. Yeah, ours, we cut them down and use them as telephone poles."
Everything's bigger in Texas, they say.
Well, yeah, and they get the humor of the series. They end up with a farm that was supposed to be 20 acres, and it turned out to be 20 acres stacked on top of each other.
It's a pretty tall tale there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like, something to talk about that. I like humor a lot as well. One of the things that I enjoy is horror comedy. I like sci-fi comedy, action comedies. I like those stories as well. And I heard, I saw that Simon Pegg and Nick Frost have a new show coming out on Amazon. And I was like, yeah, finally, because I love like the Shaun of the Dead, and
Yes.
yeah, I'm excited about that. And that's just one of those things. I feel like, well, I know horror's not for everybody. I mean, I've had people straight up just tell me like it's not for them. They don't like it or whatever. But I grew up watching like, Alfred Hitchcock, and I honestly didn't read a ton of horror as a kid. But I used to like to watch the old shows, Twilight Zone, oh gosh, there's a bunch of them. I mean, like Tales, what was that one? Gosh.
Tales from the
Crypt.
Tales from the Crypt was another one. Tales from the Dark Side was another series I liked. I liked all those kind of shows. As a reader, as a kid, I used to read, it sounds kind of crazy, but I used to read a lot of sci-fi, I read a lot of fantasy, and then I read a lot of Louis L'Amour. And those are mostly because those are the books my dad read, and I would read the books after him. And I remember as a kid, we used to go to this little used bookstore, and you could get paperbacks for like $0.25. And back then, I had the time, and I'd read, like during the summer especially, but I'd read like a book a day, And,
Yeah.
I remember those days fondly.
Yeah. But as an adult, I really haven't, until the last couple of years, I really haven't read fiction. I've read mostly like nonfiction stuff, and so trying to get back into reading fiction, it's kind of weird. But I like the stories that kind of flow where, like Ray Bradbury was talking about the way he wrote his short stories, kind of flow like a movie trailer or like a movie or whatever. And I like those short stories, or I like anything that kind of flows like, you can visualize it as you go. I try to write that way too. I mean, I know it doesn't always come across that way, but I try to, do my best, because as I'm seeing it myself, I want to, try to capture what I'm visualizing and, share it. So what's something, go ahead.
I was going to say, you could do worse than find someone to emulate, or you could find worse to emulate than Ray Bradbury's style.
It's weird because I didn't emulate him. I just started reading him like about a month ago. I just was agreeing, like, I love the way he does that. And I'm like, wow. I didn't realize other people are out there doing that.
Well, he's been such a big influence on writing in the field, as well as the ideas he brought in.
Yeah.
He definitely, I have found that I read all of his short stories. There might be a few out there I missed, but I definitely read a large amount of them when I was younger. And in fact, that's probably, if I were going to credit somebody with why I'm publishing horror short stories right now, it would probably the Ray Bradbury.
Oh, wow.
And some of the stories that, sometimes you read something when you're a kid or when you're in high school, and you get back to it a little bit later when you're, a few years later, and you're like, well, I see why I liked it, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, Ray Bradbury's short stories just get more and more relevant.
Oh my
stories
gosh!
Like, right? So stories like The Murderer, which is about a gentleman who lives in a world where there's all sorts of audible stimulation, like people talking on phones. This is before the invention of cell phones. Radios, music playlists for everything, and he goes around sabotaging things that make noise.
Mm.
So like he brings a radio jammer on a bus, and nowadays it would be like a cell phone jammer, so people couldn't get on their little comm links and tell their family when they were going to be home. And the ideas in that were just so ahead of their time, and yet so very, very human.
Oh yeah, that's one of the things I love about all the stories I've read so far. I've read 54 short stories of his so far, and one of the things I love is that they all are revolved around the human condition. I don't, no matter where it's at, what the story's revolved around, and some of the twists. Oh my gosh! I mean, like, he's just like, there's this one that was it's about a school teacher who didn't like children, and it just said, and the kids killed somebody. Like the paragraph just was like, yeah, and they threw him out the window and he died. It was so abrupt. I wasn't expecting it, but I enjoyed the twist. And a lot of the short stories that I've been reading so far, they have an ending, but they leave like an opening. It's like, there's an ending, but there's more. Like it leaves you wanting to know more.
And I'm sitting here thinking about O. Henry's ghost stories. Not O. Henry. James Joyce, I believe. Turn of the Screw.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Someone on the comments is going to know which author I'm talking about.
Turn of the Screw was, I think.
Isn't that that classic one? It's like a really old story, and then it's somebody. I just actually came across a kind of like an indie published version of it, but yeah, that I read part of it, and I was like, oh, this is kind of different. I never read the whole thing though.
Yeah, he's actually done quite a few stories before he died of something.
Yeah.
In which they also have the ambiguity that you're mentioning.
Yeah, a little cliffhanger type stuff. Kind of neat. There's this one. It was a garbage. I think it was called The Garbage Men or something like that. And it starts off, the guy's really happy. He's got a partner. They go out and they collect the garbage in the morning, and it even says like the garbage isn't that bad when it's fresh. It's worse when it's been sitting for a couple days or something like that. And like you could just really connect with it. I mean, it's not gross or overbearing. I think like some of the stuff I've seen where people try to just go way over the top and whatever, it's just real, And then they talk about like that they called all the garbage men in, and they say, hey, and this, I'm saying garbage men for a reason because this is the way it was written, not sanitation engineers or whatever. But it was called that, and they called the garbage men or whatever, and they called them all in, and they said, hey, if you get this call on the radio, then you're going to need to be dispatched. You dump whatever you have in the can, and you have to pick up these nuclear fallout, bodies, people that died from a nuclear fallout. And the guy is like, I don't think I want to do this job anymore. And his wife is like, what do you mean you can't work? I mean, how are we going to live? He's like, I don't think I can do this. He's like, and then he had this nightmare. He's talking about like stacking up these bodies in the back of the garbage truck, and these government folks had figured out like how they can get so many bodies or this and that. And I was like, wow, this is so crazy. Because by the time he wrote it, like nuclear fallout, nuclear war, it was a very relevant topic. But even till today, I mean, it's like war is a persistent topic. It's like. Could I have this? Would I be able to do that? I don't think I could do it.
I think that. So I remember. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
I think that I remember that story And I thought that, I definitely, there's a number of levels in there, including the level of this question of when you're asked to do something that might be contrary to your own humanity, but the stakes are, this is how you live. How
Yeah.
would you decide? And I think that that's that has always been a relevant question. I think it still is, and I think that the fact that that question is in that story is one of those reasons why people are still reading that story and still enjoying it.
I agree. Let me do the station announcement, y'all. Everybody you tuning in today, this is WRUU Savannah. I'm sorry. I got to start that over. Tongue tied. This is WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And going back to that, the human condition, I feel like, is the best way for storytelling. I mean, I know that there are a lot of people out there, storytellers or whatever, and there's a lot of different ways to tell stories. But the stories that I enjoy the most are the ones that are about the human condition. Not necessarily where they're giving me a moral lesson, like an Aesop's Fable type thing. I'm not, trying that, or even like classic fairy tales or whatever. I'm not, looking for that. But something that makes you think about, like, okay, well, what is this? So this is a problem. Like when his wife is like, well, how would you quit your job? How are we going to live? That's a real problem. It's like, well, if we don't have an income, how are we going to afford, to pay our bills and to eat and to live? And I love how, he addresses those problems, like everyday life problems,
And he does it without condemnation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something too, like, for example, with horror, horror, it seems to me that it kind of addresses a lot of fear and a lot of, like you're, talking about, not liking bugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that gives you a safe way to address that fear without having to actually engage in it, And it also, like, to me, like a good horror story is like riding on a good roller coaster. You're gonna have ups and downs, and it's gonna be exciting. It's gonna be kind of scary, But at the end of it, you're gonna arrive hopefully safely in the station,
This is one of the reasons why I liked Elizabeth's story. And I don't want to give away too much. Definitely, buy my book. But the fact is, a lot of the fear and the horror in that story is not necessarily it doesn't come from where you might think it would come from. And to me, that was a very interesting take. And I thought it was done really well, because at the end of the story, going back to the human condition, one of my favorite tropes is the humans are the real monsters, and I'm not going to say anything else, because again, I think I've already given away the ending.
Yeah, it's always like what people can do is worse than anything that a monster can do.
Yeah, I was going to say, it actually made that story a bit of a hard sell for until I got it into your anthology, because it wasn't quite traditional what people were looking for. As I was describing, 2/3 of it is a warm story of friendship.
Yep. Which, horror, to me, that's... I guess every editor has different opinions, which is why there's so much really great horror being published right now. And if people are interested, I'm going to plug the Horror Writers Association. If people really like horror, which I do, that group, especially on Facebook, there's always people sharing what they're publishing, and there's so much really great stuff out right now. So, there's room, I think, for everyone. But to me, traditionally, horror is... There's been such a body of work that you can point to a legacy of the different kind of horror that you're doing. So for me, my favorite horror that I like to point to is Charles Grant, who pioneered what he called quiet horror. And he published an anthology called Shadows. And it was a little bit, it was not a huge anthology. anthology. I think the first volume had 4 or 5 stories, one of which was by Stephen King. And the quiet horror came from the fact that these are stories that happened in our contemporary world. I mean, they started coming out in the 80s, so it's not super modern anymore. But they were, there were stories of people trying to live and the emotions that they had, and the horror that comes from those situations. So for me, it was a story that was rooted in that sort of a tradition, and I really enjoyed it, which is why it's in the anthology.
That's an interesting take. I like true crime stuff, and that kind of reminds me of like a true crime, like a not necessarily a historical fiction, but contemporary horror fiction, I guess.
I also enjoy true crime, though I come out less from horror and more from mystery. And by mystery, I mean specifically the mystery PBS program Opening Debt. I cite for being way too much of the genesis of my imagination. With the Edward Gorey opening.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, as a kid, I used to watch that show called Unsolved Mysteries too, and I guess watching those shows and reading different stuff as a kid, it kind of set my imagination. Where I don't know, I enjoy nonfiction stuff more because I really feel like the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction. I feel like that's so true. Because some of the stuff that has happened throughout history or whatever, and even our modern history, it's just crazy, and I feel like horror, like Rachel, kind of going back to the what you're saying about Ray Bradbury. I feel like the reason why his work is still relevant is because even though some of the stuff was dated and the tech and the sci-fi or whatever, it was obviously dated or whatever, because he focused on the people in the story, those emotions, those don't really change a lot from generation to generation. People can understand and identify, what's it like to, have a loved one, get sick and die, or, whatever. And I feel like that's just the heart of good storytelling is like, when you can identify and connect with people, and the reader especially, where they can feel like they're in the story, either being one of the characters or maybe following along with it. I feel like that's a good aspect of storytelling.
I agree.
We have a couple minutes left of this first hour. So, Rachel, where can people find out more information about the Chrome Girls Press new book, The Stories We Tell After Midnight, Volume 2?
People can hop on our website, www.cronegirlspress.com, or they can also hop into our Facebook group, which is facebook.com Crone Girls Press.
All right, cool. And Elizabeth, do you have a website for your mom's publishing company?
That'd be deadfishbooks.com, and you should get a prompt to sign up for a mailing list, and if you do that, you get free stories.
Okay, cool. Very
and
cool.
I'm getting a lovely email from us. And also, later in October, November, we should be putting up our first call to submissions for Universe of Attractions, a speculative anthology of romance, in which I've already tried to convince one poor Target clerk to apply to.
All right. All right. So we're gonna come back at 4:00, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. This has been the first hour of the Adam Messer Show, and my special guests today are Rachel Brune and Elizabeth Davis. And we've been talking about their anthology, the new Chrome Girls Press, Stories We Tell After Midnight. And we'll be back at 4.
This is WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU